We are going to take you live now to Sydney, where Acting Treasurer Simon Birmingham is speaking about Labor's decision to oppose the government's income tax package.
Are still being run by Bill Shorten and the same opinions that drove them to policies of higher taxes. And their decision today is one that continues to place higher taxes on hard-working Australian families. Now, this is something that we had hoped the Labor Party would come to their senses on. But instead, Anthony Albanese is imposing and planning to impose a higher tax burden on Australian families and more uncertainty on the Australian economy. The quickest way, the best way to give long-term certainty to the Australian economy is for the Coalition's full plan for tax relief that will benefit some 10 million Australians to be legislated in its entirety when the Parliament returns. Labor say they're going to oppose stage 3 of this plan, but I invite people to look closely at just what it is they say they're opposing, because there is only one element of our tax plan that remains unlegislated at that stage 3 stage, and that is the plan to reduce the 32.5 cent in the dollar tax rate down to 30 cents in the dollar. It means that for those earning wages between $45,000 and $200,000, they'll see their tax cut from 32.5 cents in the dollar to 30 cents in the dollar. That's the only thing Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party say they're going to vote against. They're going to vote against tax relief for workers earning $45,000 or more. Now, I think many Australians would wonder why it is that they would want to stand in the way of such tax relief. Tax relief that has been advocated by economists, tax relief that is demonstrated to ensure we keep our tax rates more competitive and don't blow out to have some of the highest income tax rates in the world. The Labor Party is looking pretty poor under the leadership of Anthony Albanese at present. He can't manage to get John Setka to resign. He can't manage to get the Labor Party to change their position on income tax. This is a party and a leadership that is showing real signs of weakness and division, because we've now had days, even weeks, of Labor MPs quietly backgrounding and publicly calling for Labor to let the tax package through in its entirety, and yet today it seems it was Bill Shorten still running the show, not Anthony Albanese. Ultimately, Anthony Albanese is a leader who appears to have all of the authority of a field mouse because he can't manage to get the result that would give Australian families a better, fairer tax system for the future.
What is the rush in looking at tax cuts that are going to keep in for another 5 years? Why not take it one step at a time?
Well, why is it that the Labor Party can only think just a few weeks ahead, a few months ahead, rather than actually support a plan that's about reform for the future? I think Australians want their government to look more than a few months or even a year or two into the future, but to be able to plan for the future just as they plan for their futures when they take out mortgages and make long-term commitments in their lives. We want to make sure that we deliver long-term infrastructure vision, as we are, long-term support for public services, as we are with the NDIS, and indeed long-term improvements to all of our tax system, but particularly these changes in relation to income tax, which over the next few years benefit 10 million Australians who are hard-working Australians who go out there, take on an extra shift, get a promotion and shouldn't suffer the consequences of bracket creep, or should certainly be able to get into a position where they don't see more than a third of their wages taken away in taxes, but instead actually see that level of tax come down, as I say, from 32.5 cents in the dollar to 30 cents. One change, starting for those earning $45,000 or more. Why on earth would the Labor Party stand in the way of that simple change in tax relief?
What discussions have you had with personally with Centre Alliance senators about tax cuts in the coming Senate session?
Well, the decision today by the Labor Shadow Cabinet should not let Anthony Albanese or the Labor Party off the hook. The simplest, most effective way to deliver tax relief and tax reform for hard-working Australians is for Labor to let this package pass the Parliament unamended. That's what the Australian people voted for 5 weeks ago, and I call upon the Labor Party and the Labor caucus to revisit this decision of the Shadow Cabinet, to think about the fact that they are now going to stand in the way of Australians earning $45,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 from getting tax relief into the future, from seeing Australia have a more competitive tax regime of 32.5 cents in the dollar reduced down to 30 cents in the dollar.
So a proposal for a new commercial port in Darwin is being backed by Andrew Hastie. Can you tell us what stage the discussions are at on that idea?
Oh, look, I'll leave those questions to Rightly, the Infrastructure Minister. Of course, these matters, if they are commercial, need to stack up commercially, and they're things that people will have to bring to fruition, proposals with that commercial backing, and then, of course, work through all of the relevant environmental approvals and other such things.
Given the state of the economy, is the government prepared to revisit company tax cuts to get investment and productivity moving?
Well, our plans for the economy were outlined comprehensively by the Prime Minister in his speech today to the West Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Their plans, where he outlined clearly the importance of seeing our full tax reform agenda legislated and implemented, and giving that certainty that the Reserve Bank Governor, that leaders of industry and business and leading economists have all called for. He also outlined the importance of a productivity agenda driven by eliminating unnecessary red tape, by getting more effective and quicker approvals for Australian businesses in terms of their expansion opportunities, by ensuring that we have work where Australians are incentivised to work harder, and an industrial relations system that rewards those who work harder and is as efficient as possible for Australian business. It was a comprehensive plan for economic growth, and it starts first and foremost with ensuring our tax relief on income tax is legislated for Australians.
So you mentioned that obviously the Infrastructure Minister would be the best person to talk to about the stage of the plans on that port, but are you able to confirm whether there have been any informal talks with the US about improved access for Marines from the proposal?
Well, look, we have, of course, agreements in place in relation to the United States and the operation of US Marines in Darwin. That's been a successful and expansive activity over a period of time. In terms of the detail of those arrangements, I'd, in that case, refer you to the Defence Minister.
Just back to
Last question.
Centre Alliance senators. So have you spoken with any of them ahead of the upcoming Senate session about these tax cuts?
Well, we talked to all of the crossbench senators about all aspects of the government's legislative program, and that's exactly what people would expect us to do. But just because we're having discussions with the crossbench about any and all of our legislation and treating them with the courtesy and level of engagement that you would expect doesn't mean the Labor Party should be able to just walk away from this. The Australian economy deserves the certainty, and Australian workers deserve the knowledge that they'll get the tax relief they voted for 5 weeks ago, and Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party should stop standing in the way of that tax relief for hardworking Australians. Thanks, guys.